A real man will admit that he makes mistakes, and I am a real man, so I apologize. I wasn't thinking, I had a brain freeze, and I was rushing, and as it turned out, I wound up prepping a lot of questions for episode 2, which was a mistake, because not a lot happens in episode 2, and I don't know what I was thinking, but all I could say is, I'm sorry. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. And folks, of course, I kid. There's so much that happens in episode 2 of season 2 of The Last of Us. And the good news is it has received 16 Emmy nominations, including one for Outstanding Drama Series. And I am so pleased to have our guest for today's episode, showrunner and writer Craig Mazin. You also know him from the Script Notes podcast, which he co-hosts with John August. And we also have with us editor Timothy A. Good, who was Emmy nominated for editing the second episode entitled Through the Valley. And if you want to take a closer look at that episode, we've put it on our blog as a script. You could read Craig Mazin's screenplay for Through the Valley at backstory.net/read-the-last-of-us. So that's kind of fun. It's online and you could read it for free, so I hope you check that out. But look, this was a very complicated episode. It got a full range of emotions from the fan base. You don't need me to tell you that. But at the end of the day, so much thought was put into it, and especially where it landed in the season, that there's a really good chat to be had here about pulling something off like this in a TV series, and it was very unexpected to land where it does, but I think it works. Without a doubt, Craig and Tim were very forthcoming about their creative process and what it took to get this season in the cans, so I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, it is my 20th year of podcasting, and I couldn't have done it without you, so thanks for tuning in. And of course, while you're surfing around online, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. If you've never read us before, you could test drive us and read the free issue. And if you like what you see, and I hope that you do, I hope you'll consider becoming a subscriber. And to sweeten the deal, I am giving you discount coupon code SAVE5 to save $5 off a 1-year subscription. So look, it would be fantastic if my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these Zoomcasts. That's right, you could see us chatting right here in these Zooms that become podcasts. I would love to have you show your support for independent entertainment journalism by becoming a subscriber to my passion project, to Backstory. So thanks for considering. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with showrunner and writer Craig Mazin and editor Timothy A. Good to discuss their Emmy-nominated series, The Last of Us, Season 2. Congrats on your Emmy nominations, including Outstanding Drama Series, and also, Tim, you were nominated for editing Through the Valley, Craig, which you also wrote. So congrats on all that, and we're going to focus on Through the Valley in a couple minutes, but I want to start with breaking in. Craig, obviously, you are the co-host of the Script Notes podcast, but I just want to go back for a second to your early education, your interest in writing. What did you study at Princeton? What was the most important thing about your education leading you on a film path?
I was pre-med, so nothing. Actually, I'll take it back. There was one thing that mattered more than anything else. I took an acting class, so I had some free elective sort of slots, and this was in my senior year, and I took an acting class, and I probably learned everything about writing that I was going to learn in college in that acting class. And I learned how text connects to performance. I'm not a good actor, and there was nothing about being in that class that made me want to be an actor, but it did it accelerated this movement in my mind that had been occurring for a few years during college, which was, hey, before you go be a doctor, just try to do this other stuff and see how it goes.
That's great advice. I mean, and of course, seeing it from an actor's perspective puts you on the page as the multiple characters that you're going to write as well. So that makes sense. Your first produced film was Rocket Man in 1997. What was your biggest lesson on that? And then we're going to get to Tim.
We're coming up on 30 years of Rocket Man. My first lesson there was that if you don't have the ability to protect the work, it's going to get a little messed up. There were some great things about that movie, and Harlan Williams did a beautiful job, but it was a harsh introduction to the reality reality of being a feature writer in particular in Hollywood. And that is, no matter how much time and effort you put into something, and no matter how much everybody else seems to have strong opinions about what you do, then once it starts shooting, stuff happens. And that was frustrating. And so, of course, I learned that lesson immediately. Oh, no, wait, it took me like 25 years.
Tim, where did you go to school and did you study filmmaking?
I went to Northwestern University in Chicago. I did study filmmaking there. I weirdly wanted to be an editor when I was in high school.
Wow.
Which is the weirdest thing. I don't know. I grew up with piano, architecture, and just sort of a sense of wanting to make something. So all these things coalesced, and then I moved out to LA in 1997, and that's that. And I have to say, this is called Backstory, right?
Yeah, Backstory Magazine's my magazine, the podcast.
Exactly. Craig Mazin wrote and starred in an episode of Mythic Quest called Backstory!
Yes, very cool. Very cool. You moved out here in 1997. You were second assistant avid editor for 1998's Lost in Space. That was your first gig that I could track. And then diving into television, you were on the McGee TV show Fastlane in 2003. What was your biggest lesson of being on Fastlane as an editor?
Honestly, all of these things are kind of my rocket, man. So I learned a lot about, well, actually being on Fastlane taught me about relationships and how important relationships are. And I became very close to my editing mentor, Norman Buckley, on Fastlane, who then took me to the OC, which then brought me to Gossip Girl, which then led me to Sean Cassidy World, which then led me to J.J. Abrams World. And all these things sort of like, I feel like relationships are this business. And so that's what I took away from that.
Yeah, and you have a lot of great genre editing under your belt with both Fringe and Umbrella Academy. Yeah. So, I mean, like, you've definitely got your chops there. But, you know, it's going to be impossible to talk anymore without getting into spoilers. So my last question for you guys is, what about season 1 of Last of Us? What was your big lesson or light bulb moment that went off that helped best prepare you for this Herculean task of season 2? Craig, no pressure on you.
I don't think there was anything that could have prepared us, because when we were making season 1, we didn't know how the show would be received at all. We didn't know if anyone would watch it. I mean, we had a hope, but we just didn't know. All we knew was that we were making the show we wanted to make, and that we were making it as we wanted to make it and working as hard as we could to get it as close to perfect as we could. But the reaction to it, the size of the audience, the critical response and the response from our peers in the Academy, all of that, none of that was predicted. So we actually didn't have anything during the process that was going to prepare us for the outcome.
Anything, Tim, that you want to say, like, for your post-process?
I would say the thing I learned most about season 1 was to trust in the characters and how much the audience wants to be connected with them very intimately, as opposed to, like, you know, sort of the larger scopy stuff. It was more about how we make sure that the audience still is really dialed in with all of the internal emotions and the subtext and all the nuances of how the characters behave with each other. And I just feel like this is the show that does that. It makes me so happy to be able to do it because it's what I love.
I mean, it goes all the way back to the video game, in which it really is character-motivated storytelling. And you guys captured that perfectly on the show. So, all right, we got to get into the spoilers here. Podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these fine folks on our Zoom chat. If you have not yet watched Last of Us Season 2, press pause, go to HBO, watch it. It's waiting for you. I don't know how you couldn't have watched it by this point, but we are going to get into the spoilers. Craig, there was something really funny you did when you released the screenplay for Through the Valley to Deadline. You wrote a letter and you said about breaking the rules of TV. If you're going to kill someone, don't kill the lead. Don't kill the big star. Don't change the protagonist. Don't permanently cut storylines off. And for the love of God, do not do any of that in episode 2. It's really wild. It's really wild. And I had read that you had toyed with where the death of Pedro Pascal, who was Emmy nominated, was going to land in the season. And I could see it having the possibility of hitting later, but it really made for a perfect and shocking episode 2. Tell us about your decision of where it was going to land.
Well, the decision in part occurred within the context of knowing that the way I wanted to tell the story, we were going to create a mystery and then bring him back. That there would be a flashback episode later that would explain all the things leading up to this weird fracture between Joel and Ellie that we've witnessed in the first episode. It seemed like if we did it in the first episode, it was almost silly. And it robbed us of a chance to create that mystery and to also understand that Joel and Ellie, even though they were estranged, still were connected in a way that neither one of them could really walk away from. And then if we had waited longer than in episode 2, I think you start to maybe get a sense that you are dragging it out or spinning your wheels. The thing about death, when it happens to us, when people that are close to us die, it's never on time. It's never the right time. It's always too soon. And finding it right there at the end of that second episode felt like it was just a little too soon, which made it exactly correct to me.
That makes sense. I mean, I thought the placement was perfect. Just for our listeners, how long do you get to write an episode? Like, once you know what your outline of the season is going to be, how long would you say it takes you to write each episode?
Well, I think the way you phrase it first is best. How long do you get? Because, I have my producers who are the schedule masters going, there's a line of people with questions. How are we going to make this thing? So I like to break the season out and outline all the episodes first so I know what's happening and when. From that point, typically 4 to 6 weeks to write an episode.
Okay.
So I try and write at least 3 before we actually start shooting. And then I will direct the first episode. No writing is occurring during that. And when I finish directing the first episode, then I start writing the rest of them. And I keep writing as we shoot, basically keeping pace, like delivering a script as we shoot an episode, so I'm always, I try and be 3 episodes ahead, but inevitably it slips. And the last episode is usually, that script is turned in a month before we shoot the last episode. So it just never ends.
Yeah. Tim, I love interviewing editors because editing is the last stage of storytelling. What could you tell us about your prep process and how you break down a script once you get it?
First of all, I love reading Craig's writing. It's immersive. It is so rich in detail. And what it does is it just gives me all of these ideas as to how things are going to show up. And I start imagining how all the film is going to come in. But it immediately makes me start thinking about music. It makes me start thinking about sound. It makes me start thinking about how it's going to feel when I read these things. And then usually what I'll do is I'll have that experience and then I'll throw the script away for a second and then allow the scene that comes in to wash over me. And then I'll watch every single piece of daily to try and pick out what I feel are important moments for the characters, transitions, and starting to build a structure in my mind of how the architecture of the scene is going to play out to maximize what I feel Craig is trying to say in each scene for the emotion, for the story, for the propulsion, and for the character dynamics. And then once that is on its feet, all of those things come together. And then after everything is put together, we'll do a sound pass. And we'll have a lot of people helping us with sound because we're all big sound fans on Last of Us. It is our favorite thing to do. And then we'll start layering all together with music. But from the beginning, it's all about just the immersion that I feel in the script and the ideas that I get from reading it. And then usually at the end, I will go through the script again and make sure there's nothing I missed.
I had read that Through the Valley, for which you're nominated for editing, was a 4-week shoot or a near 4-week shoot because of just the Jackson battle sequence.
Oh, longer than that.
Yeah.
Wow. Were you on set at all? Or were you just seeing dailies back in your command suite as it's coming in? Because some editors have a suite that's near set, and I'm just curious for something so action heavy if you were there for that.
I was not. I was being rained upon by dailies from the set. It was while the rain was raining upon the set. It was a lot. And it was every day. Everything was coming in. There were 2 units growing. I think it was 42 days ultimately that we did this. And we were near the sound stages, but I was definitely not near the battle. But there were, a couple of times I'd go down to set. But ultimately what I like in my little command center, AKA a very small windowless room, is I like the ability to just be alone and to study everything. It's research to be able to watch all this.
This is why I envy Tim. He gets to be alone. I mean, it's like all I want during the day is to be alone. And that episode was shot all over the place, including Alberta, in 2 miles in the sky on a frigid mountain, and then in our Jackson build, which was about an hour north of Vancouver in Manatee Bay. Oh, and then there was the ski lodge where all that stuff happens, which is an entirely different town. We were all over the place. It would have been impossible for Tim to be there, but it was good that he was where he was because he really did just get to receive. I think it's so important that editors can just receive. I don't want necessarily the editor to know how hard it was to get a shot. They shouldn't care about that. If they don't think it's good, then I don't want them to use it. So just receive it and analyze it like it came out of the sky.
Well, aside from just receiving, something that's really interesting is the feedback loop in the modern era, because we're able to get footage to editors so quickly. They're able to get cuts assembled so quickly. Tim, was there anything where you were kind of telling production, hey, I'm loving what I'm seeing, but I could really use a shot of X, or something that you kind of requested, which I know some editors do, which really helps out production?
There was one instance, actually, and it was because we were shooting a lot of these things out of order. I was noticing that the assault on the wall wall. They had filmed a bunch of the townspeople, and the townspeople were trying to prepare for the impending attack. And it just so happened that the townspeople tended to be running from left to right. And I was like, well, this is interesting. Everyone is going from left to right, or bottom to top, bottom to top. And I was like, well, this is an interesting direction. And rarely do you get to say this in life, but I got to ask for a Eisensteinian dialectical montage piece, which is, I basically said to our second unit director, Mons Monson, if you can film from right to left of all of these impending horde coming in, and then bottom to top, I can then match movements from all of the existing things that you've done. And it was part of the plan to begin with, but he was just sort of like, I hear you and I will do it. And so all of those things we were able to create this really intense impending conflict with doing that. And so that was the little one piece I was able to sort of like go, hey, give me this.
That's really cool. And, Craig, something I noticed in your screenplay for that episode, which I don't remember you doing in season 1 for some reason, but maybe you did, is that you used italics to get into multiple characters' heads.
Oh, yeah.
Like you're talking in italics in Tommy's head of what he's thinking. You're most interestingly doing it in Joel's head in his moments leading up to his death, as he's unable to actually speak because he's so badly beaten. But he is talking to Ellie as he's trying to kind of reach out to her. And it almost made me wonder if there was ever any of a sense of using that as voiceover, or was it just for your own reference or the actors?
It's something I've actually been doing since Chernobyl, and it is for the actors and I suppose for the readers. So there are people that need to understand the moment from the point of view of their character and performance, but then there are 1,000 people who are trying to make this happen. Now, does the person doing props need to know what Joel is thinking in that moment? No. But does someone like Tim need to know what he's thinking in that moment? Yes. And what it does is it provides everybody the understanding of what perhaps an ambiguous moment or line might be. Basically, it saves a lot of confusion. And what I've found is that actors typically don't like, in parentheses, angrily, shouting, concerned, worried, because those words are kind of hard and they're often not wants or needs. They're just adjectives or adverbs. But I've never had an actor say anything to me about that stuff. They just seem to absorb it, which is exactly what I want. So yeah, I'm sure other writers do it. I don't know why I started doing it on Chernobyl, except it just, I don't know, it felt good.
But it was never intended as voiceover.
No, definitely not. Quite the opposite. It was never, the only time that changed was Nick Offerman read the script for episode 3 of season 1. And there was a line where the soldiers, Fedra soldiers, were upstairs and he was in his bunker, and he looks up and in italics, he thought to himself, not today, you New World Order jackboot fucks. And Nick was like, I'm going to do this. I'll be this character, but there's no way I'm not saying New World Order jackboot fucks. And I was like, okay. So that was the one time we switched it from out of italics into dialogue. Otherwise, no.
That was a smooth move. You
Yeah.
know, for both writers and editors, the concept of killing your darlings, being able to part with something that you love and doing it for the better of the story is always a tough battle. And I'm curious for both of you what you could tell us. Craig, you could tell us anything you want in the entire season. Tim, I'll focus you on to episode 2, but you could also mention something from the season. But just a darling that was killed and the storytelling lesson that it gives us.
Ooh, it's a good one. I mean, in episode 2, there were a lot of times what we do is we will streamline and we'll start to see that we went off on little tiny tangents, and sometimes you don't even notice that you're doing it when you're reading the script, but only when you see it do you go, oh, you know what? By doing this, we're actually moving a little bit to the left when really we should be moving straight down the middle. And so a lot of the additional action that happened in the Battle of Jackson, we said, you know what? As amazing as this is, as cool as this is, as impactful as it was, it doesn't help the character, and by doing it, in fact, it's delaying the inevitable. So those are the kind of things that sometimes we'll just say, you know what if we lose it? It took 5 days to shoot, but it's not going to be as important as having it go straight at them.
Yeah, this is something that I've taken from my work in comedy, and that is you almost get angry at your own material. You become the meanest towards it. You never kill a darling, because if you're killing it, it's not darling. It's not right. It's not supposed to be there, So I remember Todd Phillips and we would just laugh at how angry we were at our own work, and then how happy we were to cut things. I mean, there was a joy of removing something that was so remarkable. It was like, you just get over it and excise it and you're free, and suddenly it's singing. So we make those choices all the time. The ones that are interesting to me are when it's not about killing something or removing something. It's about reshaping it or reimagining it or re-examining it or finding something new in there that maybe wasn't intended, but now it's a thing. And so there are little tiny moments like that all the time. To me, that's the beauty of editing. We don't have to worry about what we could do or what we should have done or what we're going to do. All we have to worry about is what exists. Stay within that reality, make the best out of what you have there. It's so satisfying. It's my favorite part of the process. And I can't wait to get there. I just have to, write and shoot for a while.
Cross-cutting is important on the page as our transitions and in the editing room. What could you tell us, Tim, for the cross-cutting in episode 2? Because there's a lot going on. And, of course, the biggest cross-cut moment was probably Ellie riding towards the lodge, right? Because people that hadn't played the game think, oh, she still might save him. And that's a great moment that you dropped in perfectly. But what else could you tell us about cross-cutting? Because even in the Jackson battle, you're going to different parts of the town, different points of view, and it was very complicated.
Yes, it was. And it used to be even more complicated, actually, because it was more cross-cut. And we were actually cross-cutting between the battle and the lodge. And when we put that up, we realized that, in fact, that was doing a disservice to the overall story of Joel and Ellie, because once Joel was at risk, no one ever wants to leave that storyline of Joel and Abby and Ellie's, approach. So ultimately what we did is we thought about the battle as a battle that was revolving around the two, again, all these things tend to happen around two characters. And the two characters in the battle that mattered were Tommy and Maria.
Yeah.
And anything that happens has to come from their perspective and how they're experiencing this action sequence. And so it was about finding a way to make sure that we were tracking that the entire time. Tommy's experience trying to save things when things are going wrong. Same thing with Maria, and then trying to protect Tommy as he's being approached by the bloater. And then when it came to cross-cutting with Ellie, one of the most fun things I think we got to do when Ellie is approaching the lodge is that we were able to really play everything from Ellie's perspective and not go up to see the brutality. And what that did is it created, instead of being sort of like impactful from above, it was impactful from the character learning something that we already know. The audience knows what's going on upstairs, but then Ellie has to hear these little tiny sounds and look up. And I think for the audience, they're going, you please get there. And thanks to the fact that we always do these wonderful clean entrances and clean exits, we can actually propel Ellie forward through the frame. She even took off her coat and her hat and all these things. Didn't matter. We just got rid of all that stuff because we were able to propel the action to the point where we're still following Ellie, but we're doing so in the most efficient way possible. So we get her to that doorknob as soon as we possibly can, while at the same time preserving the fact that she's going through the space.
Clean exits, clean entrances. If I ran a film school, there would be one class. It would last 1 minute and it would just be clean entrances and clean exits. You people.
But why? Craig, highlight the importance, because, a lot of people think of that as rudimentary. We know somebody's coming in a room. We don't need to see the door opening.
That's the thing. You might not. Or you might. But the beautiful part is your ability to skip something dramatically increases if you have them enter clean or exit clean, because you can skip ahead to the next thing. So if you just start them in places and then they're in another place started, it's a jump cut of them to them and it doesn't work. So you just don't know. And my whole thing is it takes 3 seconds to bring them in. Just bring them in. If you start a shot with somebody standing in the middle of the camera and then they start walking, I'm gonna find you.
I like the passion. Well, as we're running out of time, I want to hear from both of you. And Craig, no pressure on you. We'll start with you. What was your toughest scene? And Craig, it could be the toughest scene of the season or in episode 2. And Tim, same to you. Your toughest scene and how you creatively rose to the challenge and what it teaches us about storytelling.
I mean, this is where I have to talk a little bit about Mark Mylod and what a brilliant job he did as our director. And no surprise, he's, first round Hall of Famer. And Mark had the scene that was the hardest, I think, for writing and for directing and staging was all the stuff that happened before Abby shoots Joel. They come in, there's so many entrances, so many people moving around, so many mini stories happening. We've got Mel taking care of Dina, and we have this private conversation that's happening between Abby and Owen. We have Nora and Manny looking at each other like something's happening. Joel is off to the side, looking out a window, having another conversation, and then everything changes, and we have new eye lines, and everybody has to be looking at everybody. And Mark had to, and it was so inspiring to watch. because like when I'm directing, I'm always like in a panic that I'm running out of time. And Mark was like, I'm just going to take 4 hours and we're going to just block this thing. We're going to block it together like we have a lot of time. Because if we don't, it doesn't matter that we did it on time. We won't be complete. We need to know. And the nightmare that he had to manage there of angles and eye lines, because I'm all about relationships. So Tim knows, I'm like, okay, in this moment, they have to connect. Joel and Dina have to connect now. He has to tell her it's going to be okay. She has to be like, are you sure? He needs to see that she's breathing after all these things that happen. And Mark, God bless him, he got them all. But that was extraordinarily difficult to do. As arduous as it is to have 100 people running at a wall with a number of them on fire, that's very technical. But to make sure that the emotional math was complete for all of the work in that ski lodge, tough.
There's a lot of characters there. Tim, your toughest scene and how you creatively rose to the challenge.
Toughest scene, bar none, was the murder of Joel. If this doesn't work, the whole thing doesn't work. And how I rose to it is I just kept starting over. I watched all the film and I just did a version. I'm like, let's do it again now. And let's try it again and see what I can come up with on this one. Oh, no, I don't like that. 3 times, 4 times. 5th time, I finally realized, okay, certain things I just keep making these choices. And I just knew that these 2 characters meant so much to the audience and so much to everyone who's been a part of the show that I had to do it justice. And the best part was then working with Craig through that scene and to make it even more harrowing, by inserting like a couple, he's like, let's just show a couple more shots of Ellie looking at the dead face of Joel. It's not punishing, but it's an endurance for the audience to have to experience that. I mean, it was just emotionally hard to watch all of Bella Ramsey's incredible dailies every time. So it was really difficult, but ultimately I'm very, very, very proud of it. It's certainly one of the best things I've ever done.
And it said a lot with just staying on her face through a lot of the beating, because we know what's going on and it's almost even more horrific to not see it. So, I mean, it worked on that level as well. Well, look, congrats again on your Emmy nominations. Craig, Tim, thanks so much for your time today. And I can't wait to have you guys back someday in the future.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks a lot.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to showrunner and writer Craig Mazin and editor Timothy A. Good for being so generous with their time and coming down to chat about The Last of Us Season 2, which is nominated for 16 Emmys. And if you want to check out Craig's screenplay for Episode 2 of Season 2, Through the Valley, you could read it on the Backstory Magazine blog. Just go to backstory.net/read-the-last-of-us. And the whole script is right there, just waiting for you to read for free, so enjoy. And folks, while you're surfing around online, I hope you check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net, or you could read us via our iPad app, Backstory. And if you've never read us before, you could read the free issue and test drive us. And if you like what you see, and I hope that you do, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5 to save $5 off a 1-year subscription. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and it is my 20th year of podcasting, so thanks to each and every one of you. It would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and also my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these Zoomcasts. That's right, you could see us chatting on Zoom. It would really mean a lot to me to have you support my passion project and also independent entertainment journalism. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2025. All rights reserved. And folks, if you want to get in touch, there's a bunch of ways you could do it. You could reach out to me on Blue Sky as Yo Goldsmith or Backstory_mag. Or you could find me on Instagram as Yo Goldsmith or Backstory_mag. Or you could find me on Twitter, also known as X, as Yo Goldsmith or Backstory_mag. Do you see a trend there? Of course, I also have a Facebook fan page. And if you want to go old school, you could email me anytime, backstoryletters@gmail.com. And I will do my darndest to respond to you. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.